Welcome to Live a Life. This is Samsung A32 5G. It's a new mid-range 5G smartphone that you should be aware of. Let's first start with the specs. The Samsung A32 5G comes with 6.5-inch 720p display, a Dimensity 720 5G chipset, 8GB of RAM, 128GB of storage, and 5000 mAh battery, which is average for a phone this price. But specs don't reflect the whole story. Let's first talk about that design. This is probably the cleanest and simplest looking back of the phone I've seen in years. It's just the Samsung logo and the camera lenses that are dots on plain plastic shell. The phone is made out of plastic, obviously. At this price range in 2021, there's no way Samsung is going to include a higher-end material for this price. But plastic is good. It doesn't feel sturdy or anything, but it doesn't crack as easy as glass does. The frame here that looks like aluminum is actually plastic, but it feels like a higher quality plastic than on the back. There is a headphone jack, USB-C port at the bottom, and a hybrid SIM tray on the left side of the phone. On the right, there's a volume rocker and a fingerprint/power button. It is reasonably fast and accurate. It works around 80 to 90% of the time, which is pretty okay. Samsung's phone usually have the best display for the price, but not this time. It is an average flat 6.5 inches 720p TFT display with a teardrop notch and a pretty big chin. The resolution of 720p is surprisingly usable. For normal day-to-day use, it's really not that much different from a 1080p display. If you don't pixel peep, watching videos on this phone is quite good as well. Now that YouTube allows the phones to display higher resolution video than on the actual display resolution, watching video on this phone is much more pleasurable than before. Even though the display is 720p, playing video with resolution more than the actual pixel count still makes it looks better. But when the resolution and frame rate is too high, like let's say 4K 60p, there will be some stutter when watching the video because the phone is not powerful enough to process that much of a data it wasn't meant to process. This phone only has one speaker, which is common for a phone this price. It's loud enough, but I would love to see more stereo speakers on phone like this. It's far better for mono speakers. The viewing angle on this display is not great, but definitely not the worst. You can see the content when viewing a bit off axis, with a little tint shift. The color is okay here. It's no Super AMOLED display, so don't expect a super vibrant, saturated color reproduction from it. It is an average TFT display that produces average color. Looking at the display by itself, it doesn't look off or anything, but when compared to a much more premium S21, the A32 5G has an obvious purple tint to it. The brightness is no problem most of the time. It's decently bright, which is bright enough for day-to-day use, but not under direct sunlight. It really struggles under sunlight. It is a real pain trying to look at the display under the sun. The display isn't bright enough for true HDR, but the new YouTube app allows the phone to display as much color as it could, and it looks quite decent. And to top it all off, the auto brightness is not as responsive as higher-end Samsung phones, which I never expected to be. But really, most of the time, it really takes a while adjusting the brightness. It is really annoying when you want to take out the phone to snap some quick photos, and the display doesn't get bright enough to use. I found myself manually adjusting the brightness multiple times across the day. Another annoying nitpicking issue is the ghosting on the display. It's there every time you make a move on the screen, whether it's touching or dragging. The A32 5G runs on One UI 3.1 that is based on Android 11. It is the latest software from Samsung at the time of publishing this video. It is decently fast, smooth, and you can choose not to use Samsung's feed anymore. There is an option to completely turn it off and the option to use Google Discover instead. The performance of the Dimensity 720 5G chipset is pretty good for its price. It can play arcade games flawlessly. But for games that require more computing power, it will struggle a little. One very obvious task that this chip doesn't do well is processing 4K 60p video. There is an obvious frame drop when watching 4K 60p video as mentioned, but day-to-day tasks like web browsing, social media, Netflix, or just light gaming, this phone has plenty of horsepower. Samsung Galaxy A32 5G comes with a massive 5000 mAh battery that can easily get you through a full day of moderate usage. The components inside aren't top-of-the-line spec, so it doesn't eat up as much power as the flagship does, so battery is not really an issue here. Although charging is a bit of a letdown. The included power brick only supports 15-watt charging, which is not impressive for 2021 standards. If you forgot to charge it overnight, don't expect the phone to go fully charged in the morning, and there's no wireless charging here as well. For connectivity, as the name suggests, A32 5G supports 5G, Bluetooth 5.0, Wi-Fi 5. Everything is quite good. Even 5G is pretty impressive. It has a solid connection with decent speed, whether browsing the web, social media, or streaming videos. There's no problem here. This phone features a quad camera setup, the 48 megapixel main camera, the 8 megapixel ultra-wide lens, 5 megapixel macro camera, and 2 megapixel depth sensor. Photos from this phone are decent. In good lighting condition, the photos taken from the A32 5G looks really good. But when in a condition that has super bright highlights and quite dark areas, the dynamic range you get from this phone is not great. It's either a blown out highlight or a crushed shadow. You have to choose one. The ultra-wide lens is even worse. It is soft and even has less detail and contrast than the main lens, even in good lighting conditions. The included macro lens works as it should. It can focus as close as 3 centimeters or about an inch. The photos from the macro lens let you see more detail. But to be honest, I can't really see myself using this lens after this review. The portrait mode here is not good. The software can't really separate the object from the background that well, even with the help of that depth camera. In low light, the A32 5G's camera really lags behind. It doesn't look good at all. Like the phone didn't even try to lift the shadow. The shadows are crushed, and when zoomed in, there are noises everywhere. Even turning on the night mode doesn't change much. The shadow's still crushed, with less noise and a little bit more detail. For video, you can shoot 4K video up to 30p, which is pretty okay for its price. But the video looks soft and doesn't have a good dynamic range. The stabilization is also not really great. I usually expect so much more from Samsung's camera, and they usually don't perform this bad. So to sum everything up, I would say this phone is not bad, but at the same time, it's also not great. To be fair, it's totally worth the $330 price, but there are so many phones out there that offer more value for the price, such as OnePlus Nord N10 that we did reviewed on, which you can check it out in the description. Sure, the phone came with everything you need in a mid-range smartphone, but it lacks a little bit of a spice and something special that makes it a good Samsung's phone. So to describe this phone with one word, I would say it is average. So, what do you guys think about the video? Comments down below. And if you like the video, don't forget to thumbs up, subscribe, and ring the notification bell to see more great contents in the future. See you guys next time. Stay safe.